Today I'm going to show you how to build an advanced control interface for your macro in Fusion in DaVinci Resolve 17. Let's get started. Welcome back. I'm Fuzzee D and this is Fuzzee Tutorials. Alright, so what we've got going here is this is a package that I built for a client, and this one over here on the left is the original one I did for him about a year ago, and after using it for a while he wanted some changes. So this is the new design that I did for him, and there's some interesting changes, not so much in the fact that we've gone from a top 10 to a top 5. That's not really the important part here. The important part is how I built the interface for it. So what we're looking at right now, I've got the old macros selected, and you'll notice that the logo that you see up over here had to be attached separately. So anytime he wanted to use the tool, he had to bring the tool in from his effects library, open it in Fusion, drag this in, and attach it to the tool, and then go back out and use the interface as normal. So if I select this interface, this is basically what it looked like. So if you wanted to make changes to any of these, to this up here, this stuff was kind of at the beginning. This was the color control for his top bar, and here we've got controls for his text color and font and size and all that kind of thing. We're not going to mess with that. I'm just showing you kind of the layout. And then when he got to where he was going to actually start editing the driver car names and the points and stuff, then he had to scroll down, and then for the first set we also had the controls for the fonts and the style and the color, sizing, all that kind of thing. And once you got through the first set, then we had them kind of bunched together for the rest of them. These, great big boxes taking up all this room. And then at the very bottom was controls for the logo, so if you needed to move it or resize it or that kind of a thing. So it worked. It did the job, what he needed it to do, but he quickly found that it was pretty tedious using the control, which might have been part of the reason he asked to bump it down to a top 5 from the top 10. Or he might have just found that he didn't really need the top 10. Not really sure. I didn't really talk to him about that part of it very much. Now, if we compare that to the interface that I designed for the new one, you'll see that now I use what's called a loader node. So we can actually go and browse for the logo. So you can bring up a file dialog box and you can pick your logo from that. And then I put the controls for sizing and placement and any other changes right below that. Then what I did is I created a custom control. How this works is basically I just took a transform node and then I added all these custom fields and controls to it, which gave me the label up top and then these fields. So this is divided into first place, second, third, fourth, fifth, and you can go through and you can enter the data and it updates it live. So we could go like driver 1 and you can just tab to the next field, and you can tab to the next field and do your points, and so on. You can just go field by field. And then the rest of the controls are below that. So we've got our same controls that you saw on the other one for controlling the color of the bar. I did a little separation here. Instead of this being a single line like it is here, I separated the number out so it could be a separate color. And this is the control for that. I placed that first because that's the one that would be changing when he's using the tool. And then I put all the other controls below all this. So basically these still look the same. Now I could have gone and designed custom interfaces for all of this to streamline it, but it wasn't really worth doing because these aren't changes that he's going to make very often. So it was fine leaving it like this. And when you're working with a client, you need to work within budget constraints. If he'd have wanted complete redesign of all of this interface down here, you know, that would have tripled or even quadrupled the cost. So then you go down the page. Because we've got these entry fields up here, we no longer have to have the text boxes taking up all this room. So then we can just add the controls for color and adjustments and that kind of thing without all the extra room being taken up. So it makes a much more streamlined setup. The only full text entry box we've got here is if he wants to change the wording of this where it says total points. So I left that in there. So everything is a lot slicker, takes up far less room, gives you a lot better level of control. And when you're using this tool from day to day, it's just going to be a lot faster. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to build this type of interface. It'll be on a different tool, a smaller tool, because I don't want the tutorial to run too long. And just so you get an idea of how much code or nodes were involved in this one, that's all of it right there, shrunk down so you can see it all. And I'll just give you a quick look here. This one here called data entry. So this is actually the control. This is actually a transform that I just renamed. And you notice that it's not actually attached to anything because we attach it mathematically. But if I right click on this and I go to edit controls, so this is actually the interface you do to make a set of controls. And then to speed up the process, once I built my first set of controls, then I used a text editor designed for programming and basically just copy pasted the rest in place. Now the tool I'm going to show you, you don't really need to do that because there's only one set of controls, which you'll see in a minute. But let me just give you a quick look at the text editor here that I used with the code loaded in. So basically all you'd have to do is once you've got your first set in there, you would right click on this and copy it, or you could just use Control C, doesn't matter. You can open up a text editor. Now I downloaded this one here called Notepad++. It's completely free and it's set to use Lua script, which is what Fusion uses. So this is the full one because it loaded the last one that I had done. So this is all of the code for all those controls. Now this isn't really going to come into play on what I'm going to show you because we've only got one set of controls to do. And then once you've built this, if we go over here to the user tab, these are the controls that we've made in it. And then when you want to attach them to something, let's go grab one of these controls here. So we've got driver name. Okay, now we're just going to pin this data entry one, and we can open up driver name, and you'll see that there's actually a piece of code here. So I won't get into how to do that quite yet. We'll do that later in the tutorial when we build the other tool. But I just wanted to show you a quick overview here. Here's the lower third title that I designed for him last year. So I've already gone in and made some changes to this. So I've set up a loader node so that we're not having to deal with issues of not being able to save information in the power bin. So now he'll be able to select from the file dialog on the edit page when he's using this control. And I used to have the word logo in here instead of photo. So he's no longer going to be displaying a logo in here, he's going to be displaying driver photos. So that's why I made those changes. And I've tidied up a couple other little things that needed to be done, because for this tutorial I just want to show you how to do this new custom control interface. Without further ado, we can go ahead and drag in a transform node. And this is just a kind of a generic node that we can use. It doesn't have a lot going on in it. And we're just going to rename it. So we're just going to call this data entry, ETL for control. And we're going to pin this control. So the first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to put a label to differentiate it from the rest of the controls in the macro. So now we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces of data entry to be handling. This one is going to be calculated automatically. I'll show you the expression that I used for that. So it's just designed to subtract the penalties from the points, but not let the total drop below 0. So it's a fairly easy expression. So we're going to go down here and we're going to right click on this node. And we're going to choose edit controls. And then we're just going to call this one data entry, or we could even call it racing data entry. And as soon as we tab out of that, that's going to create an ID. Now we just want to double check and make sure this ID hasn't been used before. I'm pretty confident it hasn't, but we're just going to double check. Because you want these to be new. Oh. Okay. And this is going to stay as a number. It's going to be on the user page. We're going to turn off animatable, turn on passive. Very important we turn on passive. That'll keep these custom entry fields from being re-rendered every frame on the timeline. And then we're going to scroll down this list here for input control. And we're going to choose label control. And then OK. Now you'll notice up here we've got a new tab that's appeared called user. And now you can see this label controller we just made, racing data entry. Okay, so we go back down here and we right click. Edit controls. And this is going to be driver name. And when we tab out of that, you see it gives us our ID. This is going to be a text field, user page, turn off animatable, turn on passive, and then text edit control. And this is very important. We're going to choose 1, or we're going to type in 1 for lines. Otherwise you would get a box like this instead of a single line. And then we'll just go OK. And now we've got our driver name box. So I'm just going to repeat this a few times just to let you know when I get to the numbers here. These are still text controls. They're turned into numbers later on in the actual control system here. Here we're just passing it as text data, so that's fine. So I'm just going to speed ramp through this so you you don't have to go through it painfully slow with me. I'll just repeat one more time and then we'll speed ramp after that. Track number, text, page user, turn off animatable, turn on passive, text edit control, lines 1. Okay, now the final control is going to actually be a separator line. So these already exist, so I'm just going to pop open this list and I'm going to go down and choose blank 2 and OK. Now you notice a very faint line as showed up here. It gives us that little bit of separation, but it also creates a little vertical space between the control nodes that'll follow in the macro. So this is built. Now at this point, if you wanted to actually go and add more sections to this, this is where you would right click on this and you would copy, and then you can just paste it into a text editor and it'll have all that code for these that you've created, like I showed you in the first half of the tutorial here. We do have this pinned. That's important that that is pinned. And then we're going to go select the ones that we're going to attach those fields to. So we're going to attach it to driver name, track data, car name, points data, and penalties data. This is how we actually connect them to these fields, and it's really simple. So we're going to right click in this text box and we're going to select expression from the pop-up, and then we're going to take where you see this plus sign, we're going to use our left mouse button and we're going to drag this down to the driver name control, and you'll see that it changed the code here. So now those are connected, so anything we type in here is going to show up over here. So we'll just do these one by one. So right click, expression, drag it down and connect with our track number. Okay, I'll speed ramp you through the rest of this because it's just rinse and repeat. Okay, so now those are all connected. You'll notice that we've got some stuff in red here, and that means there's some kind of an error, and you notice these didn't get blanked out. Well, that's because there is an expression that's doing some calculations on here, and it can't subtract a null from a null. So all we have to do is give it some numbers, and these will actually get saved when we create the macro. So now if we go here and we'll actually put in 1 and 1. Now you see these numbers updated properly. And you'll see if I put in a couple more points, now it is calculating correctly. If I go down to penalties and I put in 20 points, or 20 penalty points, it doesn't drop below 0 here. So I'm just going to change that back to a 1, and this is going to be a 0. Actually, I'll make that 0 as well. So now I'll just I'll show you the expression real quick that's doing this calculation. So you see here we've got text for the being that it's this text control, and then if, and then we're just taking the actual points data and then the dot style text dot value. So the dot value takes that text of the 0 or the 1 or whatever you put in, and dot value changes it to an actual value. So it changes it to a number. And then we've done this here. We're subtracting the penalties data, style text, turned into a value. And if it's greater than 0, then the points data minus the penalties data will be whatever that's going to be. And then the comma gives it the extra option that, and this is the part of the conditional, that if it's not, then it's going to leave it at 0. So if it's not more than 0, then it just leaves it at 0. So it's a fairly simple statement. The syntax is a little bit different than what you're probably used to, because Lua is a little bit funny in the way it does stuff, but I don't really know the language. Full disclosure, I had somebody help me out with this. So, all right, I'm back. So the sharp-eyed among you might notice that I'm wearing completely different clothes, and that's because this is a few days later. I had a few technical issues along the way, so you'll notice that we've made quite a few changes to the nodes here. So not only do we have our fancy data entry control that we built, but we've also got a bunch of other controls that are basically the same as this, only they've just got a few little things in them. So let me show you a couple of them. So if you notice, we've got the user section here, and now we've got an individual label, and we've got a field here where we've put in some information. And this is basically so that this stuff here keeps data in it. So what I've done is, or what this will do, is refine the entire interface so that each one of the sections where you adjust the font and color and all that will have this nice little label at the top. You see there's a separator line here as well at the top. So this will separate it from the previous section, provide a label, and then just a one-line box instead of the great big square box that you normally have if you expose the style to text part of the control. So this makes for a much shorter, cleaner looking interface, and it allows us to have separation and labels for the end user. In this case, the client who this is designed for will just find a much easier time using this tool. So that's what all these extra nodes are across here, and these as well. This is for labeling the areas for the colored bars and stuff to change the colors and whatnot. One of the things that pushed me into doing this was there's a bit of an issue with the order that you select this stuff in. So normally you want to select these in a proper order, because the order you select them in is going to determine what order they show up in the macro or the library effect that you're creating with the macro. The first time I filmed this, I had forgotten that when you've got a whole bunch of these merges, especially when you have multiple layers of merges in all these vertical sections that tie into other merges that are going across this way, you can see there's a whole ton of them because of all this layering. So if you try and get too fancy with the order you're selecting stuff in, it just won't work. It won't throw any errors, but when you go to use it, it just won't output. So it stays blank. So that pushed me into creating all these extra tools here so that you can have that nice layout for people. When you're just using labels within these particular nodes, sometimes you can't get the label where you want it, and everything winds up looking a little bit cluttered. And I'm looking to create more professional tools, and I want you to be able to create more professional tools. One of the things that held me back for so long was how difficult it is to figure out how to do all this, how to make these really nice levels of controls and separate everything out. You know, it's one thing to have a kind of a jumbled up, messy control interface for yourself, but it's a different thing when you're creating these tools for other people. I found it very difficult to find the information I needed to be able to do this kind of stuff. Now that I've been kind of forced to do it, we're going to pass this on to you. And so I'm going to show you how to select the stuff, to create the right order in the macro, and then we'll test that macro to make sure everything looks good. Then I'll go ahead and show you how to turn that macro into an installable library effects title. And the other thing that I needed to do was go in and put some preliminary information so that this stuff is kind of filled in the first time the client goes to use this. The version that I had filmed a tutorial for previously, I hadn't done that, and everything comes up blank. There's also a new transform node here. So this used to be the very last control because it's got my contact information and that in it. But this particular client, he sprung something on me that hadn't been part of the original concept. So I needed to come up with a fix for it. And what that was is this was designed originally for 16 by 9, and he wants to do some of his editing in basically 1 by 1. So he's doing, in this case, 1080 by 1080. Well, these controls are less than 1080 long, so when he goes to use them in there, it cuts it off along the edge and then repositions some of this stuff. I had to go back in and make some alterations to the controls to give them the ability to reposition some of that stuff. And it's a lot easier to reposition when you're first loading it, when you don't have to go in and enter a bunch of information first. I wanted to give him, you know, the basic starting stuff instead of having all this stuff just showing up blank. That's why there's this extra transform down here from the previous examples I showed you of the Fusion nodes. Now the other tool that I built for him, I had to put this in as well, but being that tool is a lot more complex and already made, I didn't want to have to go and remake it from this level out because I had already done a new interface for it, like this one. He's going to have to work with that as is for the time being. That's the other tool is pretty big, and it would take an awful lot of work to kind of fix that up. Now there are ways that you could go in and have it automatically detect the size of project that you're using it in as far as aspect ratio goes, and automatically resize and reposition stuff. But that would require quite a bit of code and is just kind of beyond the scope of this level of tool, unless the client wanted to pay quite a bit extra money for me to do that. So this was the solution that we came up with. I only mention this because some of you out there that watch this may say, well, hey, why couldn't you kind of automate all of that? And that's why. I'll take you through proper selection. We start off with our loader. So this is where he can actually load the picture that is going to go in here. Originally he used his logo in here, but now he's using pictures of the drivers. So that's why we want this right at the very beginning of the tool, because he'll be using this every time he uses this tool. And then we select the transform so that he can resize and position the photos. And then we'll add our data entry, our main data entry control. Okay, so now we'll go and start selecting from the front back, and we've got to keep this stuff in order. We can't go too crazy about changing order of things. So we'll grab those two. And sometimes when you select a whole group, it changes the order from what you're expecting. It doesn't always add them from top down. So we're going to make sure we select this one separately because we need that above the rest. And then we can just draw a group around. I'm holding my control key down, by the way, for this. And we'll just keep repeating that. And we can select that entire block. And I can take our photo backer color, select the photo backer related stuff. That's that white disc over there. And then we'll grab the driver name custom control. And then we'll just do the rest. Okay. Now we'll click on this first one here with the right mouse button. And we go macro and create macro. And we're going to call this FD for Fuzzee D. Top 5. Oh, no, this is not top 5. Sorry, that was the other one. This is racing. Title. Version 4. Okay, so we're going to go down here and we're going to turn on file name. Okay. Now, so that I don't forget to do this, I'm going to go through all these ones that are already red. And these are all these custom controls over here that we put in. So I'm going to go down and I'm going to turn off output. It's putting them in there automatically because they're not attached to anything. So it's assuming I want outputs available for the end user to attach to. But we're not going to be using it that way. So we have to make sure to turn those all off. Otherwise, the final tool is going to have a ton of outputs on and we won't know which one to actually attach to the media out node. We are just going to go through and make sure they are all turned off. Now this racing title transform, of course, we do need an output on that to go to media out. Okay, so we'll go back up to the top and we'll start turning on the rest of the stuff. For the photo transform, we're going to expose the position control, which is center. So that gives you X and Y movement control. And we're going to use size and angle and both flips. Now, you may have seen on previous tutorials that I've done where I've then gone down into the common and turned on like blank 5 to create that separator line at the bottom of the tool. But since those separator lines are being provided at the top of all these, we no longer need to do that. So that's a bit of a time saver. Okay, now we can pack those up and all we turn on are our custom ones that we've made in the user section. So we turn all of those on. So here's our bottom bar color. That's that custom control. So we'll turn these two on. And here's our actual background node for that shape. Actually, what provides the color. So turn these on. And we're not allowing the user to change different types of coloring, you know, gradients or anything like that. It's just plain colors. It's not something that they wanted access to. Okay, once again, we don't have to go down to common to turn on the blank line. This is our other custom control. So turn on the stuff in user. And then our top bar shape background. And once again, we turn these on. Okay, I'm going to show you one more here because it's a little bit different, and then I'll fast forward through most of the rest. So the next one we're looking for is our photo backer color. Once again, just turn these on in the user section, and then the photo backer background. In case you're wondering, the photo backer by itself, that's the actual mask that creates the shape from the colored background. Just in case you were wondering. So the photo backer, that's that disc right there. Yes, we still have to allow for moving it, but that's done with the merge. Yeah, and we want to use this one down here and not this one up here, because when you move something in the merge, it only moves what's connected to the foreground, and we need to move the drop shadow and everything behind it. So it's photo button merge that we're looking for. Here we go, photo BTN merge. All right, so we're going to allow them to change the position, and that's it, nothing else. We're not going to allow a change of size here. We are going to allow a change of size and aspect ratio on the very last transform for the whole control, but we don't want to individualize access to that. Okay, so after photo backer, we've now got driver name. So our driver name control, and we just got to turn on the two user controls, and then we've got driver name. So that's where we're going to give them access to changing the font and style and color and all that. So here we turn on font. Now, of course, we've already got the little control we made for the style text portion, so that stays off. We've already attached the controls to these fields using expressions. We've got font, style, color, green, blue, and size and tracking. So we've got nothing else we've got to turn on under text. So we can pack that up. And then in layout, we'll turn on center. So that actually simplifies things quite a bit. And the reason I didn't use the merge to control position is because it's just the one thing that needs to be controlled for position. And the reason I used the merge on the other one is because we had a whole bunch of stuff grouped together that we needed to move all at once. We're pretty much at the end here. So got our photo merge. We just need to go down and turn on the comment box. That is what's loaded with my company and contact information. And then we turn this on. And this again is for the entire control to deal with that issue of aspect ratio. We'll turn center on, and we're actually going to turn on aspect so it can compensate and maybe make everything a little taller size wise. And that should be it. So now we're going to close. It's going to ask us if we want to save. Of course we say yes. And it'll normally automatically prompt you to save in the correct location. If you don't see this path up here, then this is the entire path. And you would of course replace where I've got my name with your own name, or whatever username you're using. And make sure you've named it appropriately. This name is what's going to show up under your list of macros, and unless you change it specifically, this will be the same name it'll show up under for your title. So we'll hit save, Okay, so now to test it, we can just disconnect from our media out. And we can hit Shift Space. And since we called this version 4, select our racing title version 4. You can just type in the first couple of letters so that it starts finding it on the list. And we'll add that in. Now the reason it came up with this is because of that loader tab or loader node. So we'll just select his logo to put in there. And then we'll connect it to our media out. So there you can see everything shows up. And it's already got our proper labels and everything. So now we'll take a quick look at some of the controls here. So here's our center control. This is our browse button that comes with the loader. So if you want to change that picture, you just hit the browse and you get the same dialog box again. So this moves our photo. And we can resize it if we want. And we've got control over the angle. And we can even flip it either way. And here's our data entry section. Notice we've got the label here that says Racing Data Entry. So if we want to go in and put our points in, we could put in 500. And then 50 for penalties. And you notice it calculates it immediately over here. And if we put in more penalties than points, it cannot go past 0. See, there we go. It still shows a 0. And then we've got our bottom bar color, and you notice it's got 2 big separators here. Actually, there's 3. I guess I accidentally put a few extra in there, but that's fine. This gives us some separation between the data entry portion. So now this is where we can go in and change colors. So this is for our bottom bar color. You can see by the label. And in case you're wondering why this appears to be misspelled, that's because in Canada and probably the UK as well, it's spelt this way. And in here I didn't feel like going in and changing the controls to match, so this is the Americanized spelling. So you can use the sliders to change the colors, or you could click on that and that brings up your color control. And then we've got our top bar color, and of course we have the same thing with our bottom bar. We can change the color there. This is the photo disc. Okay, so I want to actually fix this. I don't like the fact that this is, if it's confusing me, it can confuse the end user. So actually, now that I think about it, I don't have to go remake the whole macro. I can just go in and turn on the blank line under the common section for these controls. I'm just going to go down and check the rest here. The rest seem to all be in the right position. So driver name settings. Yeah, that's all grouped together properly. So yeah, it looks like the rest of the blank lines are in the right place. Not sure why they messed up in the other section, but okay. So this is easy to fix. So we'll just delete that, and we're going to right click, edit macro, and then we'll select our racing title 4. And I'm just going to go put our spacing back in here for our bottom bar shape background. Go to common. And we'll turn on our blank 5. We'll see how that looks like. I'm kind of fussy when it comes to this stuff, so I do a lot of tweaking and tuning to get it just right. Okay, so we'll save that. And shift spacebar. And we'll add that one back in. Okay, we'll connect it to our media out. Okay, I'm probably going to be tweaking back and forth quite a few times, so I'm not going to take you through all that. I'll just bring you back when I've got it all the way I like it, and we can do final testing. Okay, I'm back. So I've got all the final little tweaking and tuning done to the layout here. So now you'll see we've got our spacers or blank lines in all the right places. So we've got one separating our loader node from our racing data entry, and then we're separated properly from our bottom bar color control and our top bar. And because I was getting a little confused, I got double blank lines here and here to totally separate out the section for our photo backer. Now we've got this in the right spot. Won't be confusing. And we've got our ability to move all of our other sections here. So like for our driver name, you can move that. And same thing with all the rest. Now this isn't really important now for using it in 16:9, but I'm going to show you a test where we use this in 1:1, and then it becomes very important. And of course we've got our little label controls, single line high, so this makes everything take up a lot less space. And I've got another timeline set up. So this timeline, you can see that it's set up as 1:1. So if we take a quick look in the Fusion tab, so we can just grab this tool. And we'll attach it. Okay, so now you can see how it's cut this off. Now, if you were to go up here to settings, which would be the same, well, actually, this isn't the same as what you would get on the edit tab. On the edit tab, if you go to settings, you would have the ability to resize all this, but it would still leave all these edges cut off and everything in the wrong spot. So now to deal with this, we would just come down to the bottom and we can resize it. So we'll shrink it down. Now that brings everything in for us to use. And then we can reposition it. And this is why I'd have to aspect ratio in. If the client decides he wants it looking a little heavier vertically, we can do that. Although you can't do it too much or it's going to kind of warp stuff that you don't want warped, but you got a little leeway there to play with. And then we'd have to go up and change all this other stuff. But I just wanted to show you here in Fusion kind of the reasoning behind this. And when I show you how this title works in the actual edit tab after we make our macro over into a effects library title, then I'll go into more detail and show you how that'll all work, because it's also what the client is going to want to see. So I'll be taking that little section of the tutorial and making it a standalone one just for him. And we need to do a couple little things here to turn this into an actual installable package. We're going to go up to our file explorer, open a couple of them, and actually I need a third one. Okay, now I've already got this folder available to me quickly and easily. So this is the one I showed you before, but I'll just show it to you again. Let's actually extend this out a bit so you can see the whole thing. Okay. So now you can see that's the full path. Once again, you would replace my name with whatever your username is. And then we're going to take this racing title, and I've prepared a blank structure. Guess I didn't actually need this third one, but I do. I wanted to show you where this is going to wind up after it installs. This way you'll know how to go and remove them if you've got some that you want to remove because you get a new version and you don't want the old one cluttering up your available library effects. Okay, so if you're starting from this macros folder, we go back out to support, and then we can go back into Fusion, and then we'll go into templates, and then here you see all of your installed library effects. So this is where you would remove them. You would just delete them from here. So I don't need these extra ones floating around in my effects library. So I'm just going to get rid of these. So now what I'm going to show you is how we create our package. So I've just created something in my documents folder. You can do this anywhere, your desktop or whatever works for you. I just created a Blackmagic design folder. And then I've got this blank structure for Fusion packages. This is not something that DaVinci is going to actually see. This is just for creating the package. So within here, we have to create, edit. You don't have to have this Fusion one. This is only if you're doing special kind of standalone Fusion effects. But under edit, then you need to create your effects generator, titles, transitions. And we go into titles. And we're going to remove this version 3, and we're going to take our version 4 and we're going to copy it in here. So I'm just holding the control key down to force it to copy instead of moving it. I actually just remembered I of course did a new scoreboard for this client as well to address that sizing issue for aspect ratio. So I'm going to put this one in here too. And then they can both be installed together in the package. So this is where you need to have separate names if you're not going to have the same icon used for all of them. DaVinci Resolve has actually added a new little feature where if you want all of your controls showing up in their own folder inside of library effects, you just create a folder right here. And then you move this stuff into that folder. And then you do this same of the rest of the process that I'm about to show you. We'll just go up here and add to archive. And then we take this zip file that was just created and we're going to rename it. So you can name this whatever you want. It doesn't have to match the name of the tool we just built because the individual names inside the edit and titles folders there are going to determine what it shows up as within your library effects or your effects library. So we're just going to call this FD Racing Package. And then we're going to change the extension from zip to DRFX. And that's it. All it is a zip file with a different extension. Now for your end user, let me address one quick little thing. If you're working with Fiverr and you go to deliver the package to them, make sure you turn this back into a zip. That's one way to do it. Or you can put it inside of another zip file, have them unzip it, and then take this. But usually I just turn it back into a zip. I deliver it to them and then give them instructions on changing the extension to a DRFX. It's just easier. If you've got these on, say, a Google Drive, or you're putting them in an email and delivering them that way, then you don't have to worry about that. You can just leave it as a DR effect. In any case, we're just going to double click on this. And that will automatically fire up Resolve. And then you just click on install. And then we can go find the tool. It should be under titles. Now, occasionally it won't show up and you'll have to restart Resolve to get it. But it usually shows up without having to restart. So here's our racing title version 4 and the new scoreboard I built for him as well. So we're going to grab this and we're going to drag it out here. So I'm going to show you from the top how to deal with this tool when you've got a different resolution of screen. So remember, we just go right down to the very bottom. And we change our size. And we're going to need to change our position a little bit. Okay. Now we can go back up to the section where we've got our photo backer color. And we can move that disc into the right position. And then if we need to, we can go back down and move this a little further. Okay, so we've got some data entered in there to work with. And I'm just going to go put in some actual better numbers. And now this is awfully small for people to try and read, and we've got to change positions and stuff. So we're going to scroll down, and so we've already repositioned our photo disk, and that's one of the reasons it's positioned where it is in the stack, because that's got to be moved out of the way before we move anything else. So we can go down to driver name, where it says driver name settings, and then we can make this bigger, and then we can position it. And we can do the same for our track label. Oh, we can increase our size. And change our position. Now, once you get everything the way you like it, so you don't have to do this every time, we're going to use our power bins. Now, if you don't have power bins visible over here, you just go up to View, and you turn on Show Power Bins. And then it'll show up over here. So I'm just going to take this testing power bin, and then we're going to take this racing title, and we'll bring it over here, and then we'll just click in the field. Sometimes you got to double click on the name, and then we can add something to the end, so we can call this 1080 by 1080. And then when you want to reuse this on something where you've made all these changes, you just bring it over here from your power bin, and Bob's your uncle. All those settings were saved. That's how you use this on different aspect ratios. It's a bit of a pain. It's not the most elegant solution. It's what was appropriate for the circumstances. Now, if you're making something like this from scratch and you want to accommodate this kind of thing, there is ways you can go in with expressions and code and have it recognize the aspect ratio and screen size and resize everything automatically and reposition everything automatically if you want to go through that kind of work. Might actually be easier to just remake the tool specifically for the different aspect ratios. It would certainly be simpler, and then provide one for 16:9 and provide another one for other aspect ratios. If you want to see me do a follow-up to this tutorial, or if you have any questions or comments, make sure to drop those down in the description and we'll do our best to accommodate you. If you found this useful today, please make sure to hit that like button, and if you want to see more of our videos in the future, make sure to subscribe and click that notification bell so you don't miss a thing. Thanks for hanging out with us today, and we'll see you on the next video. Bye for now.